Hello, everybody, and delighted to join you this morning. My name is Aid Thomas. I am the founder of Green TV, and Green TV is the organization behind the EV Summit. I am absolutely delighted that you can join us for this year's first EV Summit online event, a hugely exciting online event entitled Leasing and the Acceleration of EVs, in partnership with the world's most significant leasing organization, LeasePlan. As many of you will know, I am firmly of the conviction that there is no longer an electric vehicle future. There is only an electric now. Our speakers today, I'm sure, in large part share that conviction and will outline how leasing is a significant solution to smoothing that rapid transition to electrification. A few short years ago here in the UK, electric was just a single percentage point of the vehicle ownership landscape. Now, the last set of SMMT figures show that 16% of vehicles sold here in the UK were electric, with over half of that figure pure battery electric. Last year, we well and truly pressed the start button and began to accelerate. This year, electric mobility will further that acceleration and speed into cruise control. To aid us on our journey of understanding today, our speakers are a superlatively strong lineup. They are Matthew Walters, Head Consultancy and Consumer Data Services at LeasePlan; Lorna McAtear, Fleet Manager at National Grid; Simon Down, Associate Director at Deloitte; and Penelope Guarnay, Carbon Program Manager at BT, as well as Oliver Johnson, who heads up the sales side at ABB. So, in terms of format, key to the success of the online EV Summits event series is interactivity with our audience. So if you have any questions for any of our speakers, do post them into the chat in your Zoom window, and I'll be sharing those with our speakers as we go along. So without further ado, Matthew, as our opening keynote from our partners at LeasePlan, I warmly welcome you to the global digital stage. Matthew, over to you.
Thank you, Aid. Hello, everyone, and a big welcome from LeasePlan. We are really excited to partner up on the first of the EV Summits online series of single panel events. I'm delighted to be joined by some truly inspiring experts on a wide range of topics, including some real world experience of how we can all make the switch to electric vehicle fleets. I think it's fair to say that most of us probably want to get beyond 2020 and even 2021 as fast as possible. So how about we zoom us into the future? So as Aid says, I'm Matt Walters. I head up LeasePlan's UK consultancy team and data services. And today I want to talk a little bit about 2030, because it's 2030, not 2020, that we in the fleet industry need to be thinking about now. Of course, most people here today will know what 2030 means, but let me give you the short version. 2030 is the date by which the government wants to ban the sale of new conventional petrol, diesel cars and vans. Some hybrids will be spared, but this too may well change as the government continues to bring that target forward. The ban was first proposed by Theresa May's government, and it was proposed for 2040. Then it was 2035. Now, as confirmed by Boris Johnson last November, it's just 9 years away. Just pause for a second and reflect. 9 years away. So the fossil fuel vehicle, our preferred mode of transport for decades, certainly since I've been a company car driver, I remember the changes coming in 2002 on company car tax. Our preferred mode of transport is on the way out, and the future is zero emission. Future most probably electric and hydrogen electric, unless Elon Musk manages to magic up some other form of clean power, such as that used by his zero emission rockets. And that future, let's not forget, is pretty soon. When it comes to think about leasing contracts, 9 years really isn't that long, perhaps just 2 renewal cycles, as we see lots of firms moving into 48 months and looking to move away from the traditional job need fleets into more business critical fleets, or recategorization of their fleets into business critical and perk, largely due to COVID. The shift is really seismic. And LeasePlan recently surveyed 2,000 people, fleet managers, senior managers in small, medium enterprises and large companies. And it has to be said there's some skepticism over that date. As many as a third of fleet managers said they are reluctant to prepare for the 2030 ban because they believe the deadline will be pushed back. In a way, I guess you can see what they're getting at. These are uncertain times, but unless and unless we have over a decade of Johnsonian rule, it's possible that a new prime minister could come in and tear up their predecessors' policies. Me personally, I think that's very unlikely. In truth, there's plenty of reasons that the 2030 ban will hold. And even if it doesn't, there are also plenty of reasons to consider going electric. To discuss them, unfortunately, I'm going to have to drag you back from the 2030 and a nice bright electric future into the present day, or rather to 2020, sorry. And last year, a remarkable thing happened, but it was easy to miss because there was a lot going on, in case it escaped anybody's notice, and not all of it to do with fleets. But when it comes to motoring, it was truly big news, and Aid's already touched on it. But the number of alternatively fueled car sales in the UK, which includes electric and hybrids, outstripped the number of diesel car sales. Turning point was about September, again, when according to SMMT, about 60,000 new alternatively fueled cars were sold, compared to about 47,000 diesel vehicles. And over the whole year, alternatively fueled vehicles overall made up somewhere between 17 and 18% of sales, with varieties of plug-in electrics made up over 10%. So these cars aren't niche now. This is not something that is coming. This is something that is here and here now. They are mainstream. And despite some of the concerns that we hear about upfront costs or charging infrastructures, those numbers chime with what many of our customers are saying. They want to go electric, or at least cleaner, on the way to electric, because they know what's at stake. Nothing less than the air that we breathe and the future of our planet. Besides, our customers also know that the 2030 ban isn't the start of the road to zero emissions. We're already on that road, with plenty of government policies already in effect to encourage us to consider electric vehicles as opposed to internal combustion engine vehicles. We've seen a reform of the company car tax system that introduced new bans and lower rates for low emission vehicles, including, at least temporarily up until April, a company car tax rate of 0% for zero emission vehicles. That's right. So think about that for a second. You could give your company car driver a car on which he pays no tax, and not forgetting, you therefore don't pay any Class 1A national insurance contributions. So the cost to you is much lower. And we've seen similar reforms to vehicle excise duty. And there's the salary sacrifice system that still reserves tax benefits for ultra low emission vehicles. And with consultations with Revenue, Treasury, through BVRLA and other sources, that is set to continue. There is no mood to change those rules. And indeed, the tax tables are now set to 2025. So there is a firm commitment that the move to an environmentally friendly fleet is here to stay. Is it any wonder then that we've seen a huge growth in EV salary sacrifice? Our own platform salary plan now not just being used as a benefits mechanism as it was before, but a true alternative to traditional company car schemes that can serve not just the perk and all employee demographic, but with the right design can also facilitate normal job need fleets. All this whilst delivering cost savings and allowing access to some of the most aspirational vehicles on the planet. You only need to look on, Fully Charged or Green TV or one of the other areas, or any of the manufacturer sites to see how exciting some of these vehicles are, and certainly some of the ones that are coming next year. And there's the albeit less and less generous plug-in car grant. Fingers crossed it doesn't get reduced again in April. But we should all keep an eye on the fact that the Office for Low Emission Vehicles has just changed its name to the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles. And we're all keeping an eye on what that potentially could mean, with any news subject to come through the OLEV portals. Separate grants for installing charge points at home and at work, and don't forget about clean air zones. The pandemic may have stalled their expansion around the country, not least because the air got cleaner without them, thanks to us all driving less. But clean air zones are likely to return with a vengeance at some point. So we don't need to, and we shouldn't wait till 2030. The direction of travel is already set. Going electric can save you money now on your tax bill, on your fuel, your whole life costs, whilst also doing your bit to save the planet. Of course, it's not as easy as those two words make it sound, going electric, right? It's a big decision for fleet managers, and many of them have legitimate doubts and questions. If we return to that LeasePlan survey I cited earlier, a third of fleet managers mentioned a lack of charge points in their area. Half said that the process of switching to electric vehicles is very time intensive. Frankly, that's why we in the leasing industry have to help. LeasePlan are, as you would expect. I'm not going to go all salesy at this stage, but we've introduced a range of products and services to help our customers make the shift. These include LeasePlan Flexible, which allows our customers to hire vehicles any period between 3 months and 2 years. And that product is now pretty much all electric or certainly hybrid electric. It's also worth noting that leasing in general is suited to this period of change. The financial risks, sticker prices, resale values sit with the leasing company. It's much easier to change vehicles than if you bought one. And our account managers can guide customers through every stage of the process, from deciding on an electric vehicle to learning how to use it and beyond. The best way to get ready for 2030 is to get ready for now. And we can help. Thank you. Back to you, Aid.
Matthew, thank you very much indeed for that excellent opening gambit and that insightful strategic overview. I'm delighted to say there are a huge number of questions that have come in for you from our online audience. I will have to pick and choose from this very long list. Picking up on your point about charge points, Joel Teague of Co-Charger asks how big a blocker to fleet electrification is an inability to charge back at home overnight, and what impact is that happening? And maybe you could add in some specifics on how maybe you're addressing that as an issue.
So one of the things that we do first and foremost when we are talking to customers is we start the charge point survey process, for want of a better expression, early, particularly for those drivers who are driving cars and who are driving them for their jobs. So are they able to have a charge point at home? Will their landlords allow them access? Do they have off-street parking? All of those things. So, the best answer is to have a home charge point. But, there are people that won't be able to have one. And that doesn't just mean you're in a city. You might have a listed property. You might live, somewhere where there is no off-street parking. And that can be a challenge. And where we are seeing, I would probably say about 90% of people are able to either utilize public access charging infrastructure if they are not able to have home charge points, or have home charge points. So it's a small percentage that is left where you simply have to say, at the moment, a fully electric vehicle may not be a choice for you. It may not be able to be had, in which case you have to look at the most economical hybrids or beyond. So it's becoming less and less of a blocker. There's lots of surveys, statistics can prove anything we want, but one of the ones that we did said that about 65%, 75% of people simply say that the only people that are concerned about charging are those that don't drive an electric vehicle, and that once you've driven one, the concern goes away because you realize that you can manage with some very small behavioral changes.
Absolutely. The recent ZapMap survey suggested over 90% of drivers who go over to electric don't go back to combustion. A question which perhaps puts you on a little bit of a spot here, and let's discount Tesla, who are possibly not part of this thinking, but Josephine Code asks, which brands do you see as leading in the EV market in the next 5 years?
Wow, good question. So Polestar 2, which is a Volvo and Geely conglomerate, that product is phenomenal and is set to take off in a big way. Good price point, luxury vehicle, takes advantage of the grant that's still in place. VW has to be a call out with ID3 and ID4. I mean, ID3 is a game changer from a range, type of car, and actually the price point as well is very good. Tesla Model Y will come along. We'll see how that goes. But watch out, there's some Far Eastern entrants coming in next year as well. So there's a number of manufacturers from China that are looking to introduce vehicles into the European and UK markets, which are also very exciting. So yeah, there's lots to be positive about. BMW seem to be a bit behind in terms of their production, but yeah, for me, VW, Polestar, and some of the Far Eastern marks are the ones to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredibly exciting start to the year, hasn't it? With the OEMs really rebranding, repositioning, releasing new vehicles. It's difficult to work out at this stage, who's going to be in the lead. Everyone's really gunning for it, aren't they? So it's a very exciting moment. The last one comes in from one of the most influential speakers and voices in the space, Greg Archer, who is at Transport and Environment, the highly respected Brussels-based NGO. He asks, lease prices on EVs remain relatively high in part due to risks regarding residual values. Are leasing companies being excessively cautious? Question mark.
No, I think is the simple answer. I think leasing companies overall, and working with the manufacturers and having seen product come back from the first range of vehicles, so the first range of S's, the first range of Leafs, confidence is growing, and RVs now are certainly comparable to their ICU marks. The only thing I would say is, don't just look at the price, don't just look at the retail price, don't just look at the rental. You must look at the whole life cost. If there's one message for you as fleet managers today, look at the whole life cost of these vehicles. Don't just look at a Polestar 2 and think it's a 50 grand chunk of metal. Look at the fuel, look at the cost over time, look at the tax, look at the class 1A, look at the capital allowances, look at all of the things that feed in before you make a cost judgment.
Totally. I think as an industry, everyone should reframe total cost of ownership into total savings of ownership, and think about it in that way. Matthew, there really are a whole ton of questions I could carry on asking you, but for now, thank you very much indeed for your excellent opening gambit and contribution. We'll see you again at the end when we bring all of the speakers back to ask questions of each other. So thanks, Matthew. Thank you. So moving on to our next speaker then, and I'm delighted to say that that person is Oliver Johnson, who heads up sales at ABB, one of the world's most significant global engineering firms with a huge interest in the e-mobility sector. So Oliver will be delivering some actionable insights around the infrastructure side, obviously a crucial piece in this conversation. Oliver, delighted you can join us, and over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Aid. Welcome everybody. My name's Oliver Johnson, working with ABB, as I've been introduced. I've got a sort of semi-script that I've worked up just to give you a bit of insight. ABB is a large multinational. We're involved in providing electrification. We've got a mission to zero strategy covering smart buildings, homes, cities, mobility, mainly by providing technology. We've got some key learnings that we've taken forward in terms of our technology that we provide for home and destination charging and en route charging. You've probably seen quite a bit of our equipment in the news recently, the likes of GridServe, etc. But I thought, first of all, I thought I'd just kick off with some learning that we've taken as a UK company alone. We've convicted or sort of taken ourselves on the route of swapping all of our fleet over to electric, 100% electric. So we've got approximately 400 cars in the UK on a sort of £400–500 million business that we run as a fleet. And we've already looking at this year alone to bring over approximately 125 of those vehicles. So we've got salespeople, we've got technicians, we've got engineers running around the UK. So this is real. I think this sort of one of my key points today is we're living the journey of mission to zero. We're living the journey of reducing our carbon footprint. And there are some learnings that have taken place on that route as well, which I can maybe give you a little bit of insight to. So obviously once the lease guys have positioned a car into your fleet as a user, so we're sitting on the user side of this fleet discussion, the home place charging is obviously a key aspect to it, and to bring that into people's homes can be an emotive subject for some people as well. So as ABB, we partnered with, we put out to tender that process to manage that, so you can manage that yourself as a big customer. As ABB, we've got our own product in that space for home charging, which is sat behind me. Oh, not that way, here we go, over here, which is designed for workplace or home charging. But to do that, you need to enter people's homes, you need to allow people to register that. So we took the decision to work with a partner to deliver that to our consumers. So I think that's an important part of the learning as a business, to allow that journey of home plug-in capability to be taken off the table as a barrier to going electric, as it were. And then really the next thing is that's become quite apparent in this journey that we've taken is, and people who own an EV understand this, is where are your critical nodes that you need to en route charge? Where do you need to stop on your way home to fill up with electricity, and how fast you can do that? And I think a lot of the infrastructure, if you look over the last year, is growing immensely in terms of rapid charging. When I talk about rapid charging, I'm talking 50 kilowatt plus type charging. And this can enable people to refuel in the old terminology, or recharge their cars en route. And we're seeing something like 7,000 rapid chargers in the UK space now, and probably another 200 ultra rapid chargers. So again, you can get down your refueling time from, say, an hour to down to, say, 10-15 minutes, which is enough for you to get home. So your quick stop, bio break, get out your car for 10 minutes, walk around, is enough to then maybe get you home or get you onto your next location. So these are very important parts of the infrastructure that will allow your people to take on board. Now, we've again found this quite hard to communicate to people who don't know about electric vehicles within the business, and we've had many questions, and my colleague Joe Elwood, who's working in this space in terms of our destination charger program, and he's also been assisting our fleet electrification program. People need to understand where those nodes are, need to understand what type of charging they might be able to get from those sites. And ZapMap is a vital resource, but how you then translate that to people who don't really know what they're doing and how to understand how fast they can charge their cars and what's realizable, I think there's some messaging, or there's some communication, and certainly the brands need to communicate that type of information better and be more open about that type of information, as in how fast you can charge their vehicles. And I think those will also help the transition to be full of less surprises when people turn up and expect a 150 kilowatt charger on their particular vehicle to charge their vehicle in 10 minutes, when in reality it's going to take them 45 minutes. So I think some of the OEMs need to step up to that plate in terms of allowing that kind of information to be more public and more understandable. In the UK, we're talking about I think 50% electrification. So we're talking around 11 million cars by 2030 is the estimates that have been put out there. There are some large programs in place that the government's putting some money into potentially, which is Project Rapid, and that's to electrify 114 key sites across the UK with electrical connections, essentially. So there's a slight failing in the market where the electrical collection piece is very expensive to enable high power rapid charging. So there's some government programs on that. So hopefully by 2023, they're talking around about 114 sites with 6 chargers on each site. And the free market is also filling in these nodes. The previous petrol forecourt operators are jumping on the bandwagon. There's plenty of private money that's also jumping on the bandwagon. There's plenty of new charging infrastructure providers that are getting out there. So again, if you're looking to convince your staff, get them to look on ZapMap, get them to look at where their local charge points might be to join up their normal journeys or their regular journeys or their longer journeys. And those again take the anxiety away from being able to get that vehicle recharged and then get home. When you look at other locations and you look at towns or places where people live in dense urban environments where they may not have the ability to have off-street charging for their vehicle, you've got people like GridServe that are providing local hubs. You've got supermarket chains that are providing chargers on their local locations. So again, that will enable people to own an EV without having home charge by those types of local services. So that's probably it from me. My 7 minutes are up. So questions, far away, please. Thank you.
So thank you very much indeed, Oliver, for that excellent overview on the infrastructure side. Let me ask you a quick question first. I know ABB is putting its own fleets where its thinking is here in the UK in a personal shift to going over to electric vehicles. Could you tell us all a little bit more about that? And further to that, is there a wider transition that will happen in other ABB territories in other countries?
Yeah, sure. There was two countries that were identified actually as an initial pilot to take everything over to full electric, and the UK, and I'm not sure where the other country was, but there was 2 countries that were put forward as an initial pilot, and then the idea is then to take all of the other the other ABB locations around the world. So I'm not sure what the global fleet looks like, but say in the UK, it's approximately 400 vehicles out of I think there's about 3,000 people in the UK. So you can probably ramp that up across the planet. So it's a big program that's taking place.
Very good. Thanks for that. There's a question from Manish Dungal, who asks, with CCS gaining more prominence, does CHAdeMO still have a big role to play in the charging infrastructure future?
Sure. So CHAdeMO have increased their capability of consumption of energy. So they used to be limited to sort of a 50 kilowatt arena. Some of the high power charging stations that we've been putting out with a well-known petrochemical brand in the UK have got 200 amp 80 kilowatt rated cables on it, so you can then charge those cars faster. But I think it will be a bit of a VHS Betamax game that's being played out already, and really there's only one OEM that's now left in that space using the CHAdeMO, which is Nissan Mitsubishi. So that may or may not die over time, but the second-hand market for those vehicles will exist for a very long time. So virtually all of the charge place operators are committed to providing at least one socket that will, potentially feed those cars, or more than one socket on their rapid charge locations.
Very good. Thanks so much. A couple more questions there coming in thick and fast. Sandro Marasso asks, could you elaborate on the average infrastructure costs that fleets need to take into account?
When you're looking at home charging, obviously the public charging or the en route charging is taken care of. When you're looking at a home charging product or a depot-based charging product, that can sort of vary per socket between, say, £500–600 to £1,000 per socket, or maybe a bit more, just depending on what they're looking to put in their workplace or their home installation. Obviously, the home installations can also attract the OLEV grant funding as well, so that can reduce the cost of those per socket locations.
Very good. There are many questions, so I will share the long list with you off the back of this, but for now, just one final question from me, from our online audience. So Gary White asks, what's the percentage of DC charging available now, and what are your targets for the next 2 years?
In the UK, I think it's something like 7,000 DC charge stations. If you look on ZapMap, the latest figures they've got, or 7,000 to 8,000, something like that. And really, when you're looking at 2030, the deployments, up in the tens of thousands or 20s of thousands to get to those points. So certainly, if you look at what we are aware of growing in the UK, you're probably looking at between, say, 500 and 1,000 charge points going out in the next 12 to 18 months. So significant amounts of new charge locations will be popping up.
Exciting times. It's going to be a very exciting year. The shift is ongoing, rapid and inevitable. Thank you very much indeed for your sage words, Oliver, on the charging infrastructure side. We'll join you again with you again at the end to ask questions of your fellow panelists. But for now, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So I'm delighted now to hand over to our next speaker, who is Lorna McAtear from National Grid, clearly crucial to the infrastructure side at a strategic level. Once again, if you have any questions for Lorna, or indeed for any of our other speakers, please do post them into the chat on Zoom now. Lorna, I understand that you're pushing against an open door at National Grid and that EVs are almost selling themselves. So over to you to tell us more about that and to discuss the employee brand benefits on the EV side.
No problem, will do. Thank you very much for that, Aid. So good morning, everybody. I would say it's lovely to see you, but all I can see is a black screen in front of me. So it's very different doing these things virtually these days, isn't it? So today I'm going to talk slightly differently about things, as Aid says. I'm going to look more at the areas we often take for granted, or we skip over when we have many of these webinars and seminars that go through. And that's the cultural and behavioural piece. It's the perception and brand image that we're tackling with. We can't shy away from the health crisis, and pre-COVID, the words that were being bandied around at that time were, this is the world's worst crisis that we've had regarding health. Air quality is absolutely key. And I think COVID has driven that home even further, because that's a respiratory one, and it's something that we need to breathe fresh air, and that's what we're told to do. So we can't shy away from it. And I think we've moved on as time's gone forward now, in the old greenwashing phases to now, it is increasingly unacceptable to be doing nothing. The expectations are that companies are doing something, and we need to look at how, as individuals, we make our stance on that and how we take those steps forwards. Matt already talked earlier about the role that governments had to play in this as well, and be under no illusion that the changes they've made to the BIK increases on ICE vehicles over the years to now the zero BIK on the zero emission vehicles has had a huge impact to the demand coming from the employees. Everyone's now justifying why they want that vehicle, and all those early perceived barriers of, oh, I haven't got one that's suitable for me, it's not quite enough on the range, or I don't have enough seats, have almost disappeared overnight with the fiscal benefit that people are now seeing. Government's also had its part to play, as Oliver mentioned, in terms of the rapid charge networks. There's a 950 million grant going into that, and it's how we play into it. So this is about our employees, this is about our customers, this is about our investors. Everyone is asking what we are doing and how we are doing it. We are in this together. And by that, I don't mean just the employee, the customer, the shareholder. I mean all of us, regardless of industry we are in. It's what is our part that we are playing in this. It's how can we make those steps on that journey to take this through. You'll hear from some of the later speakers the cost benefits, and Matt mentioned those earlier. You know, there is a window of opportunity now. 2020 has seen, if you take the positives out of it, the vehicles coming into the marketplace, albeit later than expected, but they're starting to come in. That choice and range are appearing. The government tax incentives are here, and they're here for a few years more as well. So it's taken that opportunity. Cash was the answer years ago. It's not the answer now. Or if it is, it's down to a salary sacrifice type option. It's where can we move all this forward, take those opportunities and work together to take this forward. I liken it more to an obstacle course. This isn't a sprint to a finish. This isn't a marathon either, albeit it is a long journey. It's more of an obstacle course. And we only win when every single one of us has crossed the line. So what that means for me is, even if you're leading the way and you've come to a particular obstacle and you're trying to find a way around, it's to stop, and it's turning around and it's asking for help. And it's those that haven't taken that first step, it's reaching that arm out to them and saying, here you are, I'm here to help. Where do you need us to take you on that journey as well? It's working together across industry types. It's looking at everything. So National Grid is fuel agnostic. We're looking at everything from air, rail, sea. We do the big transmission stuff. We make those big connections so that everybody else can then do those smaller connections and come in on that journey. And for me personally, it's about what changes I can make at home, not just as the fleet manager, but what can I do with my own vehicle and the second family vehicle. You know, do I need that one around anymore? Do I need to keep looking at those exceptional journeys, or do I have to think differently about it? And for me personally, it's helping others on that journey as well. It's being open about the mistakes we made. It's trying to learn from those and help others say, well, it might not work for you, but you could try this, or this might work for you in the way that you're going through it. Again, thinking like an obstacle course. One person might be able to take that leap, somebody else can't. So you need to find another way around it. So when I'm reaching out to all of you, there's a few key messages, I guess, in all of this when it comes to the brand and it comes to what we're doing. It comes to that 2030 marker on that obstacle course and how we all get there together. It's don't panic. 2030 is coming. We will get there, but don't panic. There are things you can do in your business as usual stuff and take your way forward. You don't have to make a massive leap and try and get there all in one hit. Use your normal replacement cycles. You know, work with your property teams. Look at how that infrastructure is happening. We're going to be in a chicken and egg for quite a while. We're going to have more demand than we have supply. then we're going to end up with more supply than we do demand. And it's going to keep going round and round until we get to that line and we all cross it together. So it's don't panic. It's also help. And by that, I mean, reach out and ask for help. Don't be frightened. Even if you're leading at the front, you still need help to work out what that next stage is, how you get beyond that next obstacle. It's turning around and helping those that haven't taken that first step yet, haven't been able to take that first step. Which takes me on to my next key point, which is step forward. No matter where in that obstacle course you are, even if you're far away that haven't done it, take a step forward. If you're at the front and leading, take another step forward. What's next? Is it mobility as a service? How am I helping my employees are saying, I just can't do this anymore? How am I recruiting my new people that aren't doing their driving lessons now and cannot drive? How do I think differently? How do I find a way of getting back better? Just take that step, because every little step we do helps us get to that next line. And then finally, celebrate. When you have taken that step, celebrate. I mean, let's face it, it's tough enough in this industry as it is right now. It's tough enough for all of us with the homeschooling and things that we have to deal with. Celebrate every tiny little win, because we need to do that, and help others celebrate as well. Remind them of the good they're doing and the journey they're taking onto that. And we'll all feel better for it, and we'll all get there together. There you go. Nice and brief for you, Aid.
That was absolutely fantastic, Lorna. It was like a kind of motivational speech for the sector. Perhaps you should do a kind of Joe Wicks style weekly motivational piece for us all, lift our spirits.
I think that was more for me than it was for the sector. Keep us all
great.
going.
I mean, what I took from that was you're talking about something bigger than just than those micro decisions, which are obviously incredibly important for us all in our various businesses. But you were really raising the point there that there's a bigger, more strategic issue here around human health and around our place in the world with the environment and with sustainability matters. So that was very uplifting to think about that wider piece, and interesting to hear you. I'm sure you're always talking about the technical infrastructure side, but I think about what I call the ideas infrastructure, and it's a really crucial piece, isn't it? So thanks very much indeed for raising all of those extremely interesting, as I say, uplifting issues. Now, there are some questions from the online audience. A lot of questions coming in. I know you've been asked this question before, National Grid, but I think it's worth reiterating it as an opening gambit, because people do continually ask the question. So it's that that question I know you've heard before. Can the National Grid cope with the increased demand on the shift to electrification in the mobility sector?
Yes.
Right, let's move on then.
There is. This proved it. And I can go into some of the details and the gigawatts, but you're better off talking to my colleague Graham Cooper on that, because he knows those numbers off the top of his head. Yes, we can, is the short answer. We've got so many renewables. There's been lots of press lately on how we're actually functioning, how we're actually, despite now and the challenges we've got with winter and everybody working from home and the increased power consumption, we've coped already. So the answer is yes.
Very good. Thank you for that. A specific instance of that question from Darren Manson from ECC UK. He says, how are the National Grid going to cope with the planning conditions for new builds and the requirement for them to have 7 kilowatt charge points? Is that sustainable and possible?
Yes, and the difference is, so you have to remember National Grid do the big transmission stuff, and then it goes down into the DNOs who do all that local stuff for the retailers and everything else. But we're working with governments on it. We're working, and this is what I said, we're all in this together. So it's governments, it's planning, it's local councils, it's the devolved powers that we're looking at, and it's how we're pulling all that together. We're looking at out of town solutions, and it's a case of, if I go back to ports and everything else, it's that fuel agnostic piece. It's do we build do we have hubs? Is that one of the answers now? And you look at where you go to help this infrastructure through. And as it is with the vehicle, as fleet managers, it's right vehicle, right fuel type, right job. It's the same with the infrastructure piece. It's getting it in the right places and doing it in the right way. But yes, it is happening, and we are working with the right people to make that happen.
Very good. A whole bunch of questions, and as I've said to the other speakers, we'll share that longer list with you. But a last question now from our online audience. James Neiman asks, for the 2050 goal, is managed charging a way forward if everyone goes over to electric vehicles?
not sure I actually understand. I'm happily say, what do you mean by managed charging?
Perhaps that's a reframe that in terms that I would perhaps understand better. Smart charging, is that a key to unlocking charging for a larger group of vehicle owners?
I think so. Personal opinion, I think this is how we get across that line is all solutions. So it won't just be managed charging, that will be part of it. It won't just be vehicle to grid solutions, it will be part of it. It won't just be dynamic load management in depots, that's part of it. So it's a combination of solutions that are going to get us there. Is catenary the way to do things for our trucks? Is hydrogen the way to do things for our trucks? It's a raft of solutions that will get us to that 2050 goal.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed, Lorna. Do join us again after our next two speakers when I bring all of our panel speakers back together to ask questions of each other. But for now, thank you very, very much indeed for that super insightful and uplifting motivational talk. Very, very grateful to you for that. So moving on now to our penultimate speaker, and I'm delighted to announce that Simon Down from Deloitte, the leading consultancy firm, will be joining us. Once again, if you have questions for Simon, do post them into the chat now, and also for questions for our final speaker after Simon, Penelope Guarnay from BT. But Simon, I know you head up the car consultancy team at Deloitte, and we'll be looking at cost effectiveness and the role of EV salary sacrifice in reducing total costs of ownership. Over to you, please, Simon.
Thank you, Aid. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time today. Hopefully, we'll be able to provide you with a bit of insight and some engaging information about EVs and salary sacrifice. And today, I'm going to be looking at the issue of cost. Probably the perceptions of price premium in the retail and corporate side of things. I'll touch upon the tax system and some of the key incentives available for that and supporting EVs. And then I will also have a quick look at the opportunity for employers, which I think is a really, really strong, positive opportunity to make significant changes and improve employee engagement. So I think everyone's probably aware at the moment that in the current climate, cost is a critical issue. People do not have lots of money floating around that's available to fund nice to have initiatives or other employee engagement benefits. There's a strong push in the press for a green recovery. And with some of the challenges out there, I think there's quite a demand for good opportunities for employee engagement, some nice good news to combat the bad. So taking that into account, cost is obviously a challenge for EVs. Deloitte commissioned some global research in 2018 and again last year, and the price premium or perceived price premium was one of the top 3 concerns and challenges facing people wanting to adopt EVs. And it's not really a surprise when you look at what's being provided. There's a massive cost of research and development. The materials involved with the cars, they are quite complex and high-tech machines. So it's not surprising that these new bits of kit are coming in as more expensive than the combustion engine equivalents. So I think there's a big challenge for the government, for manufacturers, for employers and society in general to try and resolve this. There will be some people who are prepared to pay the premium and make the more environmental choice. But I think one of the key issues to tip EVs into the mainstream will be reducing and removing that price premium. When you look at the government announcements, it's quite clear that there are some strong incentives for EVs. So you have the grants on the installation of home charge points, on the purchase of cars. But from my perspective, one of the biggest levers that the government have is the tax system. And they've had a long experience and track record of using the tax system. So that will be employment tax, corporation tax, VAT, to help influence corporate behaviour, because that has a strong follow-on impact for employees and wider society. So as Matt mentioned earlier, the government announced probably 2 years ago now, new very low rates of company car tax for electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. So over the next 4 years, the maximum rate of company car tax on a fully electric vehicle will be 2%. And that is a very significant reduction when you look at the rate of maybe about 10% for a plug-in hybrid and 25% or more for a combustion engine. So that's an immediate clear indicator of the government's plan to provide an incentive through the tax system to support these vehicles. And when you just look at that for company car tax, if you take the employee perspective, then for a battery electric vehicle, you might be looking at a tax bill over 3 or 4 years of somewhere around £1,000. That would compare to £15,000 or £16,000 on potentially a comparable vehicle. So that's a massive financial incentive for employees, and it's no wonder that they are looking at electric vehicles. However, one of the key challenges is for employers and how to introduce these in a cost-effective way. As Matt also mentioned earlier, thank you, Matt, for stealing a fair bit of my thunder, but that's the way it goes. Whole life cost is a critical part of this. So when you look at the price of a vehicle, so whether it be the list price or potentially the monthly lease cost, there is a premium for some electric vehicles, and for good reason. However, as Matt mentioned, and as we advocate, moving to a whole life cost basis and making decisions is critical. So for me, a whole life cost brings in all the commercial costs involved with providing a car, so a lease, maintenance, insurance, etc., business mileage reimbursement, and then it brings in all of the impacts of the tax system. So all of the payroll costs, such as employer national insurance, you look at tax bills, you look at corporation tax relief, and then you also bring in the known future changes in rates and rules. And once you've done that, you can really understand the true impact of vehicle funding choices. In many cases, something that has a premium, when you look at list price or lease cost, will actually show a significant saving when you come into whole life cost. So in my view, when you're looking at it from the corporate side, the price premium or the perceived price premium has actually gone. And that presents an interesting opportunity for employers. One other key part of this, heavily focused on the tax system, is salary sacrifice. And that's where an employee will agree to give up an amount of their salary and in return be provided with a non-cash benefit. When you look at that, what that allows is employers to widen the opportunity of electric vehicles to a much broader population. So employers can offer these vehicles on a cost neutral basis. So there's no additional cost of investment for the employer, apart from some admin and some investment getting it up and running. And that will allow employees to access these vehicles. When you look at that and compare it to the cost of alternatives, salary sacrifice may be significantly cheaper when trying to privately fund an EV. Again, cheaper than privately funding a combustion vehicle. And in many cases, it's about the same or may even be cheaper than buying a second-hand car. So when you look at it, it is a really, really good opportunity to provide an engaging employee benefit, something that offers a positive cost message for the business and for employees, and is just something that will make a stronger impact on emissions reduction. So as a quick summary, for me, cost is key, but the opportunity of electric vehicles and the incentives at the moment provide a win-win. So something that can generate savings and be beneficial for the business as well as employees, whilst also delivering on carbon emission and green agenda programs. And it will give employers an opportunity to play a role in making the move to electric vehicles. So that is something that is coming. So 2030 is the key date. And it's something that employers can look at now, because there is, in my view, no price premium. And this is something that it is worthwhile considering. It won't happen overnight, but it's certainly something people should be considering. And I believe my time is up. So I'll just say thank you again. And over to Aid for any questions.
Simon, huge thanks for that interesting financial strategic overview of the sector. You really are making me think that, along with our other speakers, that we should stop using the word cost and start reframing the conversation, the narrative, the language around savings. There's clearly a really interesting piece here around, how the work that you do, the work that LeasePlan does, can reframe that narrative and democratize ownership and the driving experience of electric vehicles. So thanks very much indeed for that. A whole bunch of questions come in for you, and I'll start off first with a question from Anthony Jacks, who raises the point that the UK government raises about 20 billion a year from motorists from fuel duty and benefit in kind. How do you see this being replaced, assuming, he says, the government won't easily give it up?
Yes, that's the biggest challenge. So there's a whole host of different incomes and revenue that the government gets. There's talk of road charging as one potential option. I expect that over time, as you get critical mass on electric vehicles in infrastructure, some of the incentives through the tax system may fall away and kind of replace the revenue there. But at that point, I think the industry expectation is the price premium on these vehicles will have dropped, so that will kind of balance things out. But that is a key challenge for the government, and one that's going to be interesting to see how that develops over the next decade or so.
Thanks very much indeed. I'll move on to a second question now then. From a great friend of the sector, James McGeehee, who's at the Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership. James is a great strategic thinker in the sector. He says, what are your thoughts, Simon, on the current FCA rules that prevent total cost of ownership being advertised per vehicle? That is, only the finance monthly payment can be shown in isolation.
I understand the requirements for the FCA rules. It's important to be clear and precise where you are giving consumers financial information. However, my personal view is that as things change, the technology is changing, how we look at vehicle provision is certainly moving forward. I would hope that there's something that can be done to provide employees and consumers with what I would consider more holistic and precise information. Employees and consumers will still have the free choice, but I think it's important to educate them, because most of the people on the panel and in the audience will have a good understanding of what's involved. But when you speak to a lot of consumers, trying to understand funding choices and make true, fair comparisons and informed decisions can be quite challenging. So I would hope that that's something that will change over time.
Very good. I mean, as someone who heads up a communications company, I'm all in favour of anything that can be done to make communication clearer, simpler. And I certainly think the sector needs that. A final question then from Gary White. He asks, are there any proposed tax benefits to encourage LCV users to shift to electric?
The tax system for LCVs is a little bit more basic than cars. Cars is weird and wonderful. So there's less opportunity, there's less levers that the government have available to that. So I'm not aware of anything as compelling for electric vehicles at this point as the company car system. But that's not to say that there won't be changes potentially on the corporation tax or even the VAT side that might provide an incentive in the future.
Okay, very good. So some work then perhaps to be done for our friends over at the Department for Transport and OZEV as it's now called. Simon, thanks very, very much indeed for now. Do join us after our final speaker, Penelope, when we bring all of our panelists back together. But now on to our final speaker before we bring the panel back, and that's Penelope Guarnay from BT. Penelope will be making the broader case for sustainability. Before we hand over to Penelope, just like to make that call out once again to you and our online audience. If you have any questions for Penelope, please do post them into the chat now, and I'll be asking Penelope a selection of those questions at the end. Penelope, over to you to talk about the broader case for sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, and thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be able to discuss the role of electric vehicles in terms of sustainability and also the policies required to not only drive the acceleration of EVs, but also carbon emission reductions. So transport is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the UK. It's about 23%, and roadside air pollution causes thousands of premature deaths every year. So a rapid transformation of the UK's vehicle stock from internal combustion engines to electric is a vital part of the solution for net zero emissions and clean air. So at BT, we have a long history of sustainability. We set our first carbon target nearly 30 years ago, and we more recently in 2017 set a science-based target to reduce our emissions intensity by 87% by 2030 and to be a net zero business by 2045. So why are electric vehicles relevant to BT? So previously, our electricity emissions were the largest source of our emissions, but since 2020, we now source 100% renewable electricity globally. So we're now tackling our next largest contributor to our emissions, and that is our fleet. Our fleet emissions contribute to over 2/3 of our direct emissions. BT Group, including Openreach, have the second largest commercial fleet in the UK with circa 33,000 vehicles, with Openreach accounting for approximately 90% of this figure. The fleet is the most diverse type of fleet, commercial fleet there is. We have cars, vans, medium and heavy duty vehicles, specialist vehicles with hoists, trailers, winches, etc. The list goes on. On top of this, we also have a mix of where approximately 70% of our engineers park at home, with the other 30% parking at our yards. This presents a number of challenges when addressing the charging of the vehicles and the need for not only home charging, public and private, to transition these vehicles to electric. These challenges, however, are not stopping our drive to accelerate the transition, with last year Openreach announcing an aspiration to convert 1/3 of their fleet by the mid-2020s and 100% of their fleet, excluding their specialist vehicles, by 2030. To date, Openreach have converted approximately 100 vehicles and are aiming to have 250 on the road by the end of this financial year. Further to this, a number of our key delivery partners who work with BT and Openreach to roll out and manage our network operate significant fleets who contribute to our supply chain emissions. We're committed also to working with our supply chain to help them reduce their own emissions, including transitioning to electric vehicles. We believe business has a major role to play in driving the necessary change. That is why in June last year, BT Group, including Openreach, partnered with the Climate Group to launch the UK Electric Fleet Coalition, which now consists of 29 companies, including LeasePlan, who are hosting this debate here today, and on the acceleration and the transition to electric vehicles. We believe by pursuing ambitious policies domestically, the UK government can set an international example. The COP26 Climate Summit offers a major opportunity for the UK to take a global leadership role on electromobility. Hence, the UK Electric Fleet Coalition is advocating for government to set policies that stimulate supply, whether that is through setting a zero-emission vehicle mandate or tighter emission standards. The UK government has the opportunity to lead the way post-Brexit and go beyond EU policy and regulation. I recently heard from a supplier that they wish to order some EV vans for some trials. However, they were not able to get any due to limited supply in the current market. We need policies that will drive and make changes to make this not a problem for not only our supply chain, but for all people that wish to have the opportunity. We also wish to look for policies that drive demand. Upfront costs remain a significant barrier to uptake, with the capital cost of electric vans as much as double that of ICE alternatives. We need to commit to bridge the gap in cost until the tipping point has been achieved. We believe this should be done by extending the incentives beyond 2023 for vehicles, in particular vans and larger vehicles, until price parity has been reached. And we wish for the government to also invest in the UK's EV charging infrastructure. Focus support for charging infrastructure, such as the 1.3 billion announced in the government's 10-point climate action plan, to areas that will have the biggest impact, such as the interoperable charging infrastructure, fast charging, access to overnight charging, and rollout to areas where the commercial case is harder to make. We also wish to ensure greater coordination across local authorities and devolved administration to create easier to navigate environment for planning, funding, and infrastructure decisions. Ensure wide interoperability of charge points to provide universal coverage. Bring forward the update to building regulations to ensure new properties, developments, and offices have sufficient fast charging integrated to be fit for the future. Pursuing policies towards a smarter grid could save money for consumers and businesses and reduce some emissions from power generation. Smart charging and vehicle to grid could add 2 billion value to the electricity system under a 2030 phase out of vehicles. And lastly, ensure that public charging creates an equal opportunity to all. Public charging can be up to 5 times more than the charging at home, which creates a divide between those who have a driveway and those who don't. For example, those who live in urban areas are less likely to have access to off-street parking. For example, in central London, less than 25% of households have access to off-street parking. Through a combination of these policy asks, we believe that the acceleration of electric vehicles can be achieved, which will contribute to not only a reduction in emissions and improved air quality, but also benefit for the UK economy through job creation in the automotive industries, EV charging, battery technology, and the renewable electricity industry. I thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you agree with what we're trying to drive in terms of policy changes. Thank you.
Penelope, thanks very much indeed. I mean, it's hugely impressive to hear the commitment that's coming from BT as you accelerate your fleets over to electric, and clearly an imperative that's required with that contribution to your emissions coming to a large degree from the electric vehicle side. So thanks very much indeed for giving us that really powerful insight into what's going on in your world. So there are a bunch of questions that have come in from our online audience, I'm delighted to say. And Fred Bell from Fuse asks, is there scope for electrification of medium to heavy vehicles in BT's fleet?
There potentially is. We currently excluding from our 2030 target any vehicles that are over 3.5 tons. This is just because we haven't been able to yet find the solution that is, financially viable and also works for us yet. Unfortunately, range anxiety, which many people would be aware of, is currently a problem in electric vehicles. They have heavy battery weights, and we aren't able to have the range that we need to make these vehicles suitable for electric now. It's not to say, however, by 2030 or the late 2020s, there won't be a solution for this.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I think it's a really exciting space, that space, and there are some really interesting OEMs coming on board, aren't there, with some solutions on that side. I think we're coming up a little bit up against the time limit now. So rather than open up to any more online questions, I'll bring back our other panelists, and we'll head over to inviting our panelists to ask questions of each other. So if we could bring back, please, our other panelists. So that's Simon down from Deloitte, Lorna McAtear from National Grid, Matthew Walters from LeasePlan, and Oliver Johnson, who heads up the sales side at ABB. So if I could bring you all back, please, now, and to reconvene our panel. It's questions for each other, please. Matthew, as our opening keynote, may I invite you to ask the first question? Who would you like to direct a question to from your fellow panelists, Matthew?
I'm going to ask one for Simon, if I may. So I guess we are on, I guess, the same soapbox, the same small hill on which we die, which is whole life cost, total cost of ownership. You know, we've all been making those recommendations for many years. What do you think is the best drive and the best impetus to make people switch finally to a more modern, cost-effective fleet policy?
It's quite a challenging one, that one. Thank you, Matt. I think sometimes the figures speak for themselves, especially when you look at EVs. So the way I typically approach it when I'm talking to clients is I do a slide. I simply have an EV on the left and show the whole life cost, and then I show the alternatives from the employer and employee perspective. When you look at the numbers involved, that's usually enough to get an engaged discussion. And then I go into the different mechanics of what's important, where the savings come from. But that money talks. And if you roll back a couple of years ago, that was great, and some businesses like that. Now, when you add employee engagement and the positive opportunity of making an impact on carbon reduction, for me, it's a much more compelling offering. So we would speak to clients who said, cost is great, but you need a certain number of zeros for us to be interested. Those businesses quite often think the carbon emissions agenda is much more important. So it's about covering all the bases. So hopefully that answers your awkward question there, Matt.
It's just about the laggards. It's how we get those that look at the numbers and say, I get the numbers, but it's still too difficult. It's about getting them over the line.
Yeah.
I talk about the heavy weight of legacy thinking. There's a kind of heavy coat of legacy thinking that we need to help people remove and open up their ideas, I think. Simon, would you like to open up a question now to one of your fellow panelists?
Yeah, I'd like to have a question for Lorna. In terms of the impact you see that the move to EV is making, and the positive response from employees, what would you say is the most important or the most impactful feedback you're getting about what difference is being made with this?
Other than the I'm getting a load of cash in my back pocket answer.
Yeah, more than the money.
More than the money. There is a lot of genuine concern, as I alluded to right at the beginning, on the health side of things. It really has become a focus for people. So there is a genuine desire by people now, I believe, to do their little piece, to make that difference into the marketplace and play their part. So I do see that genuinely now in the comments that I get, and the desire to change. They're making those subtle behavioural changes in order to make this work.
And can I be really cheeky and add a quick follow-on question? Where you have seen people switching to EVs, have you noticed them becoming a bit of an advocate? And
it's self-promoting.
Yeah, self-promoting.
I mean, years ago it was MPG bragging rights, now it's EV bragging rights. So yes, they do. They're not quite in the world of ex-smokers and doing this, but they are advocating EVs. Yes, absolutely. And they're helpful. You know, you get those chat forums and yammers or whatever methods that you use. They're all there helping each other. They're asking, you know, am I stupid? I haven't got my charge card right. I can't charge the vehicle. And they're all there helping each other. So there's a big self-help community at the moment.
Actually, Lorna, former combustion vehicle drivers are ex-smokers. So I'll pick you up on that one.
Yeah.
Lorna, who would you like to pose a question to from your fellow panelists?
Probably Matthew, but only because it's more in the guise of, I said we're all in this together, so how can we all help? So I know from a grid point of view and as a fleet manager battling with DNOs and regulations, it's Matt, where do you see, or where would you want any help from everybody else? Because I suspect that many of us, we talk of legacy thinking, but we have legacy policies and regulation as well. So where are the financial constraints that mean you can't necessarily offer proactive, productive, forward-thinking products to the marketplace? And can anybody help with that?
I think the one that's the one for me that springs to mind is the cost of infrastructure improvement to private businesses. So if I think about our own offices in Slough, we are going to have to pay a significant cost to the copper that's coming in the building and a significant upgrade cost. And whilst it's great that the government have capital allowance treatments and 100% first year allowances for the installation of our charge points, they don't for that infrastructure cost. And given that cost can be 4 to 5 times the cost of the actual fitment, I'd really like to see, and we are lobbying as ourselves and through BVRLA, for the government to extend first year allowance treatments to all of the infrastructure costs. So this is a flat cost that you have to pay to your DNO, which you alone have to bear. And that's fine. We accept that, you know, our role in society and our role as an organisation is that we have to pay it. But if we could offset those costs, that would help accelerate that change. And it would encourage companies to open up those charging spaces where they are publicly accessible. Perhaps they're on a by road as they are on Slough, onto the public networks more freely when they're able to offset more of those costs. So that's a big one, is that private infrastructure cost for me.
Very good. Thanks very much indeed for that, Matthew. Penelope, you were our final speaker, but I won't make you our final person to ask a question. Who would you like to ask a question from your fellow panelists?
Oh, I don't have one specifically for anybody, but I was about to say, was it ABB that are converting their fleet? I wanted to ask them what they're finding is the biggest barriers to, transitioning their fleet to electric vehicles.
I think the initial kind of lack of knowledge within the general users of normal vehicles, really. So again, it's just the misunderstanding of what is actually capable, and what the cars are actually capable of in terms of charging and what people really need at home. So I just think it's, again, I mentioned it before, maybe the OEMs being a bit more open about how fast you can actually charge their vehicles, both at home and en route. Again, they hide that in the specs, they bury it. Some people saying, yeah, we've got 22 kilowatt AC charging available at work, and most of the cars will only go 7 kilowatt speed. So I think those, just having some very clear, defined things. But once people are swapping, I think then it changes. The barrier to change, I think, it moves on. We've had a few people who don't have public charging home charging available, that happen to live near charging hubs, so they're happy to take that risk. So again, having that type of information to educate the people, or have them self-educate, makes the transmission or the transition much easier, I think.
Perhaps, Oliver, with that cohort of people that are finding the transition a tricky one, and then having those ambassadors who actually make the transition, perhaps you should look to deploy a network of epiphany ambassadors who communicate the wonderful new experience that is driving an electric vehicle. So Oliver, over to you. Who would you like to invite to ask your question to from your fellow panelists?
I guess maybe Matt, if from a sort of a lease provider, what would you say the biggest barrier you're getting back from customer users or potential clients who are in this fleet space? What's the major barriers they're putting back? And again, the same really goes to Simon as well. I
guess from an operational perspective, so Simon can deal with the financials. So from an operational perspective, we've covered some of the challenges. So one is that home infrastructure piece. There was a great question that came up around, and the question was asked around, with public access charging being that much more costly, do you end up with a two-tier system of those that can and those that can't? So that can be a challenge. The other one I would say is ongoing supply, which has come up in regards to CVs, but is also the EV production as well. So there are a number of mainstream manufacturers that do have plenty of supply, but that first supply tranche into the market tends to go very quickly. We saw it with ID3, we saw it with Kona, we saw it with Polestar 2, and we'll continue to see it. And it's kind of, number one, urging manufacturers to produce as many as they can, as quickly as they can. And number two, I'm going to say it, it'll be unpopular. We have now left the EU. We no longer contribute towards CAFE regulations for the manufacturers, and it's making sure that manufacturers continue and are incentivized to continue to ship the lowest emission vehicles to the UK. Yeah, no, and I think I agree with that, or share some of that. Any of those, the OEMs stringing out the ice, as it were, and whether we get disfavored because of the UK situation. So, okay, very interesting. Thank you.
Very good. I'd like to pose a question to all of you then. So obviously we learnt that a crisis accelerates the future, and last year was an incredibly dynamic year for the sector. Let's do a little bit of near future gazing 12 months out. And I'd like to ask all of you very succinctly, please, just to sort of wrap up with your thoughts on, where do you think we'll be in a year's time on the rapid transition to e-mobility? He said, asking a leading question. Oliver, what do you think on that one?
I think thankfully through COVID, the construction industry has still kept moving. So rapid deployment has still continued at pace. DNO connections have been slowed up somewhat, and some of that's been slowed up. But I do think by the end of the year, we'll again have some large numbers of public charging locations in place, which will enable these nodes for adoption to become reality for people. So I'm very positive about what will come out of this year, in the sense of charging and the uptake of EV. I can only see that ramping again as it did last year, as long as Matt said, as long as we get supply of the vehicles into the UK.
Very good. So the takeout there is to invest in grid serve, I think, probably. Penelope, thoughts to you. Where do you think we will be in 12 months' time?
I would hope that the electric cars, I think we were at about 5% of new sales were electric vehicles at the end of last year. I'm hoping that this will be somewhere in the sort of 15 to 20% by the end of this year. That would be where it would be a great place to be. Mm-hmm. That would be my prediction. As you said, that we've just got to get the supply and demand right. Mm.
An optimistic assumption, and one which I certainly share with you. So thanks for that. Simon, 12 months down the line with your consultancy analytical take on things, where will we be?
I'm going to cheat. I already know the answer for this. I based on the last 12 months, a lot more employers will be making the move to EVs. I think the business case is quite compelling. I think salary sacrifice will become a much more common offering, and employers will be looking at moving this outside their traditional company car population to all employee type schemes. And I think that's going to play quite a significant role in enabling the move to EVs. So I've been quite bold with my predictions. Maybe next year we can check back in and see whether I was right.
Let's do that. I'll hold you to account. Lorna, a dose of hugely positive motivational speaking, please, as to where you think we'll be in 12 months' time.
So I actually think we'll be in bedding in phase. I think this will be business as usual stuff on the car side in particular. And I think in 12 months, this isn't a case of I want to test it, pilot it and everything else. This is bedding in. And I see COVID and not being in the office as an opportunity for people to catch up with their workplace infrastructures or catch up with their definitions of what jobs need vehicles are and essential users. So I just see it as a bedding in phase. And I'm going to cheat as well, and I'm going to try and use this as an opportunity to answer two of the questions that came in from the audience as well. So I see it as the start of getting electric vans in. You know, vans are always a few years behind cars, so I actually see more vans starting to come to the marketplace as well in 12 months. And actually, when you start to look at the heavier vehicles and that infrastructure side of things as well, I think we're going to start seeing shifts in solutions and more viable solutions popping up, even if we're not ready to have the vehicles yet and put things in place. So in particular on trucks, I don't necessarily think it's EV as a solution as such, unless you're in the catenary, but you're going to start seeing more genuine conversations around a hydrogen catenary, rapid solutions, all based on vehicle usage, not necessarily, but it will be defined by usage.
Very good. We all look forward to meeting Green Van Man and Green Van Woman this year. Thank you very much for that. Matthew, as a keynote and as a support summit online panel series, some final words from you, please, on where you think we'll be in 12 months' time.
I think Lorna and Simon are spot on, actually. We are already seeing EVs become the norm. So whereas before we were looking at, ICE policies and how to introduce EVs, the conversation now starts with, it's an EV fleet policy, who still needs a FEV, who still needs a diesel or a petrol car. So that shift has happened towards the end of last year. I don't have a fleet conversation that starts with ICE anymore. I have a fleet conversation that starts with EV and alternative fuels. I think Simon's absolutely right. We're already seeing it. We're already seeing companies move their traditional company car schemes into salary sacrifice schemes. You can do it. Proof is there that you can put a scheme that traditionally uses grade allowances, etc., and move those into SalSac effectively, and it works. It isn't just a perk offering anymore. So last year it was EV is the answer, what's the question? This year it's EV salary sacrifice is the answer, what's the question? And so further thought from me, I think we're going to continue to see this accelerate. I can't think of many things where consumer pressure or consumer demand and environmental consumer pressure is working in the same way as employers and companies wanting to make the move. So these two forces combined either side are working in uniformity to drive this change. Drivers want it, consumers want it, companies want it, society wants it. So the change is only going to accelerate, and this time next year we're going to be in a much greener place.
Hugely inspirational words. Music to my ears, Matthew. We're all going to have to get used to making the transition from being mavericks to being mainstream thinkers on electrification. It's a hugely positive start to the EV Summit online series with LeasePlan, a hugely positive interpretation of what this year will deliver in the 12 months that we can look forward to. Perhaps a hugely significant precursor to what will happen across the pond this afternoon in the United States, which will also propel sustainability thinking as the United States returns to the fold of the Paris climate talks. So every lever suggests a huge impetus of positivity for the next 12 months. So I just leaves it to me to thank everybody for their fantastic contributions here today. Matthew, again, thank you very much indeed as our keynote and as our supporter from LeasePlan. Lorna, thank you for your incredibly motivational talks from the National Grid side. Simon, great analysis from Deloitte. Penelope and Oliver, hugely inspirational to see the great work that BT and ABB are doing respectively in their rapid transition to your own fleet. So thank you once again, speakers. Of course, thank you very, very much indeed to our online audience for being so actively engaged and for posing such insightful questions to our panelists. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, and we look forward to reconvening with another EV Summit online series event soon.